Sweet. So we are live on YouTube. If you guys aren't tuning into our YouTube live stream every Tuesday, today's actually 2 p.m., so it's going to throw people off. But usually Tuesday afternoon, 3 p.m., we're on YouTube. But this week, we got Mike Conneely, who has a build firm outside of Chicago. I've spent some time with him in Switzerland. He's been on the podcast before. You run a lean, mean machine building some amazing homes outside of Chicago. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
What's going
Lean
on?
and
What's
mean.
new? Lean and mean, dude. That's when I think lean and mean, I think you all the time.
Well, we're definitely lean. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, you're not mean. I just mean like like mean, like
well,
cool.
Sometimes we're mean. My better half is mean. Cousin Johnny, he's mean.
I thought you were talking about your wife for a second. I was like, that's not how we're going to start this podcast.
my other better half.
Your other better half. He's your real cousin, right? I think we asked that before.
Yeah. He was raised in Ireland. I was raised here. He emigrated when he was 22, I think. He was a carpenter back in Ireland. Mm-hmm. And he came here. He started out as a framer here. He worked for my uncle. Then he went out on his own. And then he came to work for my dad when he was finished banging spikes. Mm-hmm. And we ran projects for my dad. Then we went our separate ways, building custom homes, and came back together around 2008 and formed Greenside. And it's been rock and rolling ever since.
Did he come to Chicago because you were there?
Yeah, so I come from a long line of builders, carpenters. I have 5 uncles. Or there was 5 brothers that came here. My dad was one. So I have 4 uncles, and they're all builders. So when John came out, he came out to the youngest uncle, who was a carpenter contractor at the time. They were all carpenter contractors before they became builders. So he went to work for him, my Uncle Bert, for a few years, and then he went out on his own. And then when he was done with that, sick of framing, he came to work with us. So
how did your family end up in Chicago?
We actually started in Boston, believe it or not. I was born in Quincy, Mass. My father emigrated to Boston. My mother emigrated to Boston. They met in Boston, got married, and had me. And in 1977, I think it was.
You are old. Oh, man, I didn't realize this.
You got to stop saying that, Tyler.
I feel way younger now.
I listened to your
way
podcast
younger
this morning, and you guys were talking about you were busting on old people, or people over 35 or something. I'm like, you assholes.
So like they came in through Ellis Island.
Yeah, and the ship had 7
on
sails.
The Mayflower.
They were pilgrims.
Wait, Mike, so were you born in 76?
I was born in 75.
75?
Yeah. So in 77, there was not a lot of work in Boston, actually. So my dad heard there was plenty of work in Chicago. So he left. He went out to Chicago. My mom and I stayed. I might be running out of batteries on my headphones. My mother and I stayed in Boston until he established some work and got some work, and he started a framing crew. And probably 7 months later, he called my mother up. He's like, pack up the truck. We're moving to Chicago. So the rest is history.
Crazy.
I'm always amazed at how generations before us relocated at the drop of a hat or just to go find work. And even now, how big of a deal that is and how scary that is and how many considerations there are. And now, I mean, back then it was just like, yeah, there's no work here. Let's move the entire family across the world, across the country. And then like, I'm looking at moving with my wife and we have to have this and it has to have that. And the girls have to go to this school. And back then it's like, nope, we're leaving. See ya.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, my wife and I talk about it all the time about moving from Chicago. And we're like, you got to time it with the kids and school. And you're right, to your point, people just got up and did it.
We're soft now.
Well, that's been established. But like, I mean, where how did your dad know that there was work in Chicago?
friends of his from Ireland went to Chicago instead of Boston and
Yeah.
said, "Hey, there's tons of work here." I mean, in Boston, my dad was kind of almost like a handyman. He was
Sure.
doing a little bit of framing, a little bit of painting, a little screwing around. And when he came to Chicago, that's when he became a dedicated carpenter. He learned the trade in Chicago. I'm going to switch headphones here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nick, how you feeling?
I'm all right. Like 8 out of 10, I said to Mike.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, not bad. I mean, yesterday it was the same thing that happened the first time I had COVID.
I forgot that you had COVID the first time.
It was
Remember
just
when
like-
I almost gave your whole family COVID?
Yes, and then remember when I gave 32 people COVID? I don't think my team is super happy I'm here, but I'm literally locked in my office, door shut. I'm gonna wipe everything down.
Mine is Doug who gave it to you.
I didn't even think. Maybe he did give it to me. That's son of a gun. But yeah,
it seems though that it's getting not as severe.
Doug was like dead.
Really?
Like, yeah, he was like down for the count for 5 or 7 days or something like that. I forget how many days, but yeah, it did not do well with him. Yeah, I don't know.
I feel badly because I was bothering him a lot. I was texting him, asking him all sorts of questions. And then I found out he kept on telling me he didn't feel well. And I was like, feel free to disregard these questions. And he kept getting back to me slowly. But then when I heard he was really sick, I was like, maybe I should leave him be.
Yeah, I don't know. I gave him a hard time for being sick. And then here I am a week later. But either way.
You timed it perfect, though. You're not an IBS, so you're not a super spreader. Right?
Well, yesterday I felt like crap, and everyone was having a hard time getting to the building. Wait, Mike, are you there?
No.
Oh, you didn't go. No. Yeah, everyone was having there was flight delays everywhere. Everyone was having a hard time getting there, and we had hosted we hosted an event yesterday for the summit, and even Brad I think skated in there like right as the event started. It was just a nightmare getting there. But Meg was like, imagine if you were hopping on a flight right now and you were just sick. And I was like, yeah, that would have sucked.
So what was yesterday out of 10?
Oh, 5.
Oh, that's
really?
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not great.
I mean, without getting into detail, I just felt like I ate something wrong. So it wasn't like my head didn't hurt. It was just like my stomach.
Maybe you
did. Is that the first time you had it? Have you had it before?
I had it before, and that was all in my head. It was just, I had trouble, not breathing, but I was just super phlegmy and coughing and like a head cold. This time it was like I got food poisoning without throwing up.
What if you had food poisoning and COVID and it wasn't actually COVID symptoms? Did you ever think about that?
I did. I also haven't ruled it out, but it is what it is. So I'm just going to drink my water and go on.
I didn't know that was I didn't know. I mean, I guess I've heard of everything as being a symptom of COVID at this point, but I didn't realize that was a symptom as well.
I don't know. We're going to Apple is definitely going to flag this podcast because we've mentioned COVID 18 times at this point, but I don't know. I think that it's just encapsulating all these different viruses, and we're just classifying it as one thing where everyone feels differently depending on who they are and where they get it and what strain it is and yada yada.
So just take some Midol, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I tried that. So we're not talking about this. We're going to talk about Lean Mean Mike.
No, so last time you were on the podcast, Mike, you were saying that you were going to become certified as a passive house builder. I assume you completed that certification?
Yeah, I went through the FIAS program or course. Did it online because it was during COVID. Mm-hmm. But I became certified. I still haven't built a passive house yet. Anxiously awaiting. I had one client that was almost there. Put together budget numbers, but at the end of the day, it scared them away, the cost versus, conventional construction. So haven't done it yet, but taking the passive house, I guess their ideas and passive house building methods and incorporating some of those as much as we can into our conventional building. Kind of like what you're doing, Nick, on that house that you're building, Steve Teak house. Yeah.
So when you decided that you want to get certified for passive house, was that more so to open up opportunities to be building from a customer perspective, or is that something that you just had dreams of doing?
It was probably more for just self-improvement, just to something to add to the resume. I didn't think it was going to overwhelmingly be something that I'm only going to build passive houses now. That would be naive. But it's nice to know that I've got that certification. And if people are looking me up and comparing me to other builders, oh, this guy's passive house certified. They might not even know what that means, but
Nick, you did that,
great.
right?
I took the same course. I actually never took the test. I just have been delaying it, to be completely truthful. I'm not a good test taker, which I feel like is a lame excuse.
So you should wait a while before you take the test.
I know.
That would probably help.
I know, but everyone has told me how hard the test is, or like how
hard.
long it takes, and that has just like really freaked me out.
Were you a B student in school?
Yeah, I was like
You'll pass the test. You'll pass it.
I'm not worried about passing. It's truthfully the time it takes.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, you're going to spend 30 days putting it together. I'm like, 30 days?
But you're basically already building houses that have all those features in them. So
yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at with it, where when I took the course, like none of it was super like it wasn't like, oh, that's what that is. Like it was all just kind of like, oh yeah, I understand that. You know, it was a little bit more clarification, helpful, but the test is really just to be able to get that like rubber stamp approval. And interestingly, not to bash on Fias by any means, but someone reached out to me recently and said, hey, Nick, you were in that course that I was in. I remember seeing your name on the roster. Did you get your certification? I'm like, oh, I never took the test. He goes, I took the test 6 months ago and they still have not sent me anything. And I've called them every week. So I think that they were dealing with just like some overload, or maybe like, you know, as everyone, you know, just help. They end up getting it, but he said that it's just been a mess, and, you know, which it wasn't, you know, wasn't further pushing me from getting it done. It was simply just, we're already making some of those, you know, conscious efforts to build better, where, you know, yeah, it would be great to be able to add that to my signature in my email, or be listed as a certified passive home builder. But at the same time, it's, you know, there's other things that are taking priority for us and for me, that
I mean, what does the certification actually do other than just say that, hey, I'm like, I have this certificate? Because you could still build a passive house without certification.
It's really just getting you into that network,
it's like a college degree.
Yeah, exactly. Great.
And to have the house certified as passive, you need a passive house rater and a passive house designer, I guess. So like as a builder, you really can't do anything except, I guess, converse about the building and give the tips and the methods, means and methods, but you cannot certify it as a builder. You have to have a rater and a designer, and then they have to submit it to Fias after it meets all the qualifications.
It seems silly to me that they're making it so. I mean, I understand from a basic standpoint that it's very difficult to build a passive house, but you would think that they were making that a little bit easier to do, to persuade people to possibly go down that road.
I don't think they're making it hard. I think that there's it's not necessarily hard, or like, it's not necessarily hard. It's just a lot of information.
Yeah.
And they're all like, you know, best practice and, you know, not so much suggestions, but you need to understand like what you're trying to accomplish, where there's more, it's more than just building a really airtight home. And it tries to walk you through all of the important decisions that you need to make, but also, you know, kind of outline the why. So again, Mike, you can probably speak better to the test, but my understanding is like the test, there's like long essays that you write, and beyond just some formulas that you have to, you know, calculate and figure out, you know, what I don't know. I'm completely making this up. You've taken the test. What is the test like?
Yeah, there's some multiple choice, but there's some like long form questions, long form answers where they expect you to know a certain formula, and to answer the question properly, they're expecting you to know what that formula is, and it's like being back in school.
It's all closed
I
book. Sounds terrible.
No, it's open book.
It's open book.
I mean, it still sounds terrible.
It's a barrier to entry. It's not a huge barrier, but they have to have something to say, all right, I did this. You can't be a total moron and say you're a passive house builder. So,
you know what?
But it's not that hard. It's not that hard.
I wonder if AI would pass.
Can you build under somebody else's passive house registration?
Pardon?
Say it again.
Can you build like under somebody else's passive house certification?
Look at Tyler already trying to beat the system.
I'm not going back to school and take. I'm not.
Well,
I don't think you need.
I don't think you need to be a builder. I don't think you as in that triangle, right? Like certifier, designer, builder. You don't need the builder component in order to get the home certified, right?
Correct.
So the builder, the only thing that a builder would get that for is potential customers and, expanding their own knowledge.
Yeah.
The reality is, I mean, our code is becoming more strict and we're going to be building to much higher standards, regardless. And this has kind of been the standard that everyone's been trying to reach for a while. And as it becomes more popular, it will become more normal for us to achieve that. That's one of the things I like about Benson Wood and these panelized systems is that they come off the factory floor essentially passive house certifiable because they perform so well.
It's funny, when I was in the class, that was probably, I don't know, 40, 45 people in our online class. Easily 75% were from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And then another 10% were from like New Jersey or Maine or New Hampshire. It's like all East Coast.
Yeah. And a lot of people in commercial too, or at least in mine there's a lot of multifamily commercial.
There's incentives though in Massachusetts, I believe, isn't there? For being passive house or building to a certain level of passive house.
Yeah. And I think it's become like, especially in the multifamily, I think it's just becoming more of a thing. Like we just, I know of at least one, if not two, CLT projects, and they were more affordable housing projects. So I think there's a lot of incentive to build more cost effectively and efficiently.
How far down the path did you go with this potential or this customer as far as the like that whole process? You had designs and pricing.
House was designed, got it all the way budgeted, priced. I mean, right before he's going to pull the trigger and say, yeah, we're going to go. Just the numbers didn't work.
Were you might come back. Was he aware of the numbers? Were you guys aware of the numbers beforehand, or were you just astronomically off?
Not astronomically, because it wasn't full passive. It was, I would say 50% passive. There was a lot of zip R on there. The equipment, heat pumps, which is unusual in this area, stuff like that.
Why is it unusual?
We don't have heat pumps here.
It's just interesting to me that somebody would go through all of that, because you're not going to get a return on that type of building. If you're going passive, you're not going to recoup the energy savings, the cost. You want to build for the sake of building that way. And I feel going into that you would be pretty well aware that the numbers aren't going to make sense.
Well, and I tried to educate them. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I would argue that a little bit, in the sense that when you take a traditional design and try to convert it to passive, the cost becomes more astronomical. Like if we tried to build the teak home as a passive home, that would have been extremely difficult. The structure is just difficult in its own nature. But if we set out to build a passive home, blank slate, you could build a cost-effective passive home.
Good. They have to be really simple. They have to be like the Monopoly house shape. Like Reisinger, when he built his house, he said it was a Monopoly. That's basically what you have to build in order to get that air tightness. So you're not air sealing for months at a time. Trying to get, like the houses I build with these complicated roofs.
Right.
Oh my God.
But
I don't even know how we would do it.
so that's relative, right, Nick? Because now you've designed a very simple house and you're paying a premium for that very simple house where you're not getting a return on the savings that you've invested into this home. Where I think that should be pretty transparent going into a passive house build, that
Yeah.
like from a numbers perspective, it's not necessarily going to make sense. You're not going to recoup that investment for what you're getting. And I would think that somebody going into assuming, you're dealing with Mike and you're not just pulling the wool over their eyes, that going into this, right, that it's going to be an expensive project. There's going to be a lot of funds that are going to go into this that you're not necessarily going to recoup or pull out of that. And I mean, everyone backs out of projects for every reason, but I would think that would be more of a project where people understand going in, like, this is just what we want to do. We have the disposable income to be able to do that. Let's make it happen.
Well, part of that education is talking to a builder and pricing it out. The regular person on the street is not going to know what the construction cost. They don't even know what the construction cost is for a conventional house.
Yeah.
So you have to go through those steps, and that's what pre-con is for, right? To establish budget, put it out to pricing, and educate yourself on what it's going to cost.
I mean,
I was telling them
you got paid for all that work.
I didn't, and I didn't care because I wanted.
Yeah,
to
I
go
mean, it's
through.
a learning experience.
I learned.
Right.
Yeah, I learned. So it didn't bother me that I didn't get any pre-con.
I was going to say that'd be sick if you did get paid for it, because now you're like, I just went through all of that. I understand my numbers a little bit better and I got paid for it.
No one ever accused me of being smart, Nick or Tyler.
See?
But I tell them, it's when you want to go past, it's a lifestyle choice. It's not an
Yeah.
investment choice.
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
lifestyle choice.
Well,
And
they
I
also,
I think there's layers to that as well. But yeah, I had that conversation with somebody when we were out at when I was in Minnesota, and they had never given any thought to, they think you're going to build a passive house and then it's not going to cost you any money to live for the rest of your life, but it's like the investment that you spent on this house, you could have your heat on with no insulation for how many years, and there's no like break even point with that build.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
think
step in the
for
right
most
direction,
people.
though. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I'm kind of repeating myself, but I think it depends, right? Like, there's ways to build really high efficient homes at a passive level that you do recoup those costs. But that's even more important to have that conversation early on. Like, yes, you do need to understand up front, like, what it's going to cost. But I bring up Bensonwood because we're exploring 2 projects with them right now that I want to use their panel system. And when we did the math, like, those panels come complete ready. The shell gets stood up. It is ready for electrical on the inside. It's fully insulated, so you don't have to do any insulation. It's completely airtight, and it's ready for exterior finish carpentry. And that's at a passive level. And is the envelope more expensive than a traditional envelope? Yes. Is it exorbitantly more expensive? No. And it also saves months of time, and you end up with a better product, arguably.
Those guys, I mean, when I think of cutting edge and pioneers, those guys are unbelievable. I think you did a YouTube video on them, didn't you?
Right before we went to Switzerland.
Unbelievable. And unbelievable how dialed in they are.
Yeah, and it's, we obviously toured some of the factories in Switzerland, and the biggest difference is they do a lot more mass timber over there, where here we're using a little bit more traditional. But it's funny, like, hearing both sides. Like, I talked to Ted after coming back, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I've been to those factories." And I was like, "Yeah, they actually told me that they've been to your factory too." And he's like, "Yeah, they came to ours," and how they both have opinions on, I remember someone saying something about Ted's. They're like, "Yeah, but sometimes you have a guy just watching a nail gun fire off 250 nails. Like, that guy should be doing something else." And it's like, well, I mean, I guess in that 37 seconds it takes to fire off those nails, he could be doing something else, but it's just a different product.
Yeah.
Where it's, you got guys, in the Switzerland factory, everything's getting screwed together. I don't think I saw a nail gun.
No.
Like, there was no nail gun anywhere that I remember. I mean, maybe for the what I would call drywall, like, they had everything got stapled on the wall.
Yeah.
But other than that, everything was screwed together or bolted together. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there is a lifestyle to it. And I think it was Steve Basic that said, you know, their design, like it's a different level of comfort, where it's like you're designing these homes to have this like very like consistent comfort level, and you know, you're not going to get those like, you know, cool down, like you're not going to be able to cool down the building, you know, as under the efficient level, you know, as quickly. Like you might have times where it's not as comfortable because you're not just cranking the heat, cranking the AC. It's designed to use a lot less energy. So those time periods are going to kind of fluctuate, especially in New England where you have those shoulder seasons when it's like radiant heat, right? Radiant's amazing in the winter, but in the fall, you can have an overheating situation pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Or underheating, where you're like, I just got home and it takes my house 5 hours to warm up.
Well, that's why you're not supposed to shut it off.
Yeah.
I'll never, side story. We years ago, we went up to North Conway to go skiing, and Meg's friends, like, they rented this big house, and we get in there and it was a little chilly, but it wasn't like super uncomfortable. It was chilly. So one of the guys cranked the thermostat up. He's like, all right, I'll get it to warm up. And he's one of those guys that turns it up to 80 thinking it gets warmer faster. Well, little did we know it was radiant. And it sure enough, it got to 80 degrees, and it was like we were melting.
It wouldn't come down.
It wouldn't come down. It would not come down. It would not come down. And I remember, like, whoever rented the house got a text message because it was like an Airbnb. He's like, please do not touch the thermostat. Like, whoever touched it, like, this is radiant. It's going to take 5 hours, if not more, for that thing to cool down. So good luck sleeping tonight.
And the thing with radiant, it like dries. It's like putting the whole house in a dryer. Everything dries so fast. It separates, cracks.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think the passive way of building, I think that it's important. And, you know, some of the things that I look at in the projects that we build, and Mike, you probably feel the same way, is that, you know, some of these things are getting so complex. And when you want to achieve something like passive level or just more high performance, it becomes the expense is coming from the complexity of it. Like you said, you have all these complex roof lines. How would you ever air seal that? It's like you'd have to do it like Risinger did and build this box with no overhangs and then add all the overhangs. It's like, well, cool. Like, you built your envelope for the same money, and now you have carpenters working for 3 months faking all the overhangs. And
to
now
save how much money in heat and AC.
Right. Yeah.
I think
if I had to, though,
I'd probably be a middle ground.
I'd probably frame the roofs conventionally and foam the underside of the deck, and then go on top of the deck again and build, like, furred out another 1.5 or 2 inches and put a whole nother roof deck on.
Yeah.
So then that part breathes.
Right.
I like it when my attics breathe, to be honest with you. I don't like sealing in my attics. I prefer when they breathe. There's less problems.
You're saying a hot roof versus a ventilated roof? Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're not doing a ventilated roof, right?
Oh, I am.
You are?
Yeah.
I thought you were spraying your roofs.
No. I've done it on a couple because a client wanted it.
Yeah.
But I prefer not to. The shingles last longer. You have less chance of ice dams. I mean, even if you do get a leak and you put foam on there, you don't see it right away because that foam soaks it up. It can cause more damage. And I prefer my roofs to be ventilated. And how
are you accomplishing ventilating them and hitting your R value?
Well, on the flat roofs, the flat ceilings, we do a bat and then we blow on top.
Got it.
And then in the vaulted ceilings, we fur down our rafters to get our R value.
So your cavity is 14 inches deep?
12 inches.
So what do you...
38.
30. Got it.
You're 49, Nick?
I think we're 49.
Yeah.
We're 49 on flat. We're 49 on flat. And when you go vaulted, you can be 38.
They just released a big update too, and I know it increased. I asked. I mean, so our approach with our Needham build, our teak build, was always going to be a ventilated roof. Everything's been prepped for it, and we had to make the team made an executive decision last week that they're spraying it. And and I've always advocated for using less spray foam. So I'm sitting in the meeting. I'm like, all right, you got to walk me through this because I would prefer a ventilated roof. And ultimately, they made the decision based on, what they were presented with, and they just weren't going to be able to accomplish the R value. They weren't going to be able to accomplish the detailing that we needed in order to have that ventilated roof work appropriately.
Yeah.
And, and it stinks, but it comes back to the fact that, we didn't have that roof system fully flushed out before we started.
That's custom building.
Yeah, and and shout out to ROCKWOOL because they worked with us on that. They're doing we're using ROCKWOOL throughout the entire rest of the house, but they were very upfront. They're like, sometimes it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and you got to make a decision that makes sense. So we'll be able to bat all the cavities, and obviously we have comfort board in the basement and slab, but most, if not the entire roof, will be a foam.
So what was your venting detail with your vented roof? What was the initial detail?
Mine?
Yeah.
It was going to be a bat. It was going to be
just an air gap.
An air gap, yeah. We would have a baffle tied into the soffit.
Drawing in through the soffit, out through the ridge.
Exactly. And then, but there was air. That home, there's a couple things that kind of led to it. Number one, we end up with HVAC equipment in the attic, so we need that within the envelope. Number two, we have these roof lines that intersect a bunch of the rooms, and some of them are only 8-inch, roof systems. So we needed to, that was going to be foam no matter what. So, and we wouldn't be able to accomplish the venting because we didn't have the space there. So way back when, we actually looked at what Mike, you said, is creating a system on top of the roof and ventilating it. But when we drew that up, we were basically changing the geometry of the entire house.
Is there living space in the attic on this job, Nick?
No.
No.
Yeah, see, most of ours do have an attic or a third floor space.
Mm-hmm.
So those are exterior walls. We plywood and R-board those,
mm-hmm.
and a flat ceiling. So that's all insulated, and that's where our furnace typically goes. So it is in conditioned space, but our ductwork is not. It's
mm-hmm.
insulated ductwork.
Just R8?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which I'm not crazy about, but
it
works.
But you know what? This is the reality of what we deal with, right?
Yeah, it's not a perfect world.
No, and I was thinking about this the other day, and we're gonna do this job, and someone's gonna be like, "Hey, I thought you weren't spraying that roof," and I'm already prepping like the conversation because I know it's gonna happen, and the reality is like, no, this is part of building. Like, there's times where and there's times where I say stuff or make a decision on stuff that might not be right. I actually just posted a video on Instagram, like right before we hopped on this podcast, about how sometimes I make dumb decisions or make decisions that could negatively impact the team. And I have to own that and realize that not all my decisions are right. And in this case, I didn't want to use foam for a handful of reasons, primarily due to the failure I've seen of it on projects over the course of, I had a big roof fail on me 9 months after it was built, and that was really frustrating. And and we talked to the insulator, and one of the things I said to the team, and the team actually brought it up to me, is that what, we feel comfortable with this installer because they're at the top of their game. Where the particular installer that did the one that failed, they weren't. They were just guys that showed up in a random ass truck and sprayed that stuff, got the job done, collected money, moved on. These guys,
it's not a bad product.
It's not, but it is a complicated product. It's complicated in the sense that, like, the temperature of the air matters, the temperature of the plywood that you're spraying on it matters, the mix matters at the tank, at the gun. There's a lot of things, a lot of variables that if you're not tracking them, a slight variable can make a catastrophic failure.
And you put your trust in qualified tradesmen that can handle that and do a good job, right?
Here we are. Circle back.
It sucks that you can't do that and you have attic space too, though, Nick. Because I could see if you had living space up there, like...
If you saw the attic space, if you saw the way this roof is framed, like in person,
Yeah.
it's...
Oh, that's the one with all the site-made trusses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did a job site tour with an architect the other day and brought him up. I was like, you have to walk the attic. And he's like, okay. And he got up there. And I'm like, what you're looking at looks like you're in the roof. It's not the roof. And he said, what are you talking about? I'm like, this roof, there's a roof built over it in order to get our 17 pitch. So it's basically this like 8 pitch roof that you're standing under with a 17 pitch built on top of it. And then you stick you kind of peel around your head around the corner and realize that like 8 feet above you is actually where the ridge is. And it just, it's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of our homes, we do a combination. Probably every house we do has foam in the rim joists.
Yeah.
All the corners,
Mhm.
all the steel, and any areas that might be prone to freezing, like if there's a bathroom over a garage or areas like that. That's all foam no matter what.
Yeah.
And then when we get to the roof, like we have some shed roofs, they're, popping out shed dormers, and they might only have a 2x8 rafter.
Yeah.
So we foam that entire thing.
Right.
But right next to it is bats.
Right.
So we do a hybrid system.
Yeah.
Get our value.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to like the whole passive conversation. It's like, there's like a give and take. And, ultimately, there's parameters that we need to hit and there's parameters that we need to build to a certain standard. And, like Christine Williamson said it, she's like, sometimes it just makes sense. Like sometimes foam just makes sense. And we had a renovation. And I asked her for her opinion on it. And she's like, I would foam that. And she's like, why are you so against it? I'm like, primarily due to the failure I've seen. She goes, then find a better installer. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough.
It is tough. And then you get into not only new builds, but remodels where you're looking to work with existing systems and homes that were built and designed in a different way.
Mhm.
Our job is definitely not easy there's just and that's what actually where I was talking to Nick, where I kind of wanted this conversation to go, as far as keeping tabs on everything. Mike, you guys are building upwards of 10 homes a year, and it's basically 2 of you, a laborer, a trim guy, and a part-time office manager.
Yep.
Do you sleep
at night? No, we luckily all our jobs are within like blocks of each other, except for a few. Now we have a couple a bit further west, but they're close to each other. So we divide and conquer. I'll take on half the jobs, and John will take on half. And
like in its entirety or day by day?
Its entirety. But
so there,
I will still go visit his jobs.
Yeah.
And I'll be like the second pair of eyes, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. But I won't schedule that job. He'll do all the scheduling. I do all the back office work for all of it. Mm-hmm. And he's like a field guy. He doesn't know how to turn on a computer. But he'll run his 5. And then if we have an odd number, he'll take the odd job because I'm the office guy. But right now we've got 10 going. And we try to, the biggest thing is trying to tier them or stagger them so that they're not all finishing at the same time, because that's when it's the worst, when you're finishing. It's like a madhouse. So if we can stagger them a month apart, then we're fine.
Fine as in, because that still seems very overwhelming to me. You just think of what goes into a project, and if it's a custom project, how many moving parts there are, and how, even if you're building the same exact house in 2 locations, that it's different.
That. Everything is 100%.
But I mean, like, even if you were, it's still going to be different. Like if you're building the same house next to the other house, you're still going to experience different things, whether it's weather, soil conditions, sub pool. There's no 2 things that are the same. And it's kind of incredible to think that you were each handling 5 without a full-time office staff and without a bunch of people at your disposal.
Lean and mean.
I think my head would explode.
Yeah, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I absolutely love it. There was a period where I didn't love it. It was It was hard, but
What changed?
the Modern Craftsman.
You
Holy,
know.
look at that plug.
Yes.
Honestly, when I first started listening to you guys, you kind of got the juices flowing. I'm like, God, yeah, there's people out there that care. You can talk about this stuff, and quality matters. And maybe my bottom line is not increasing, but at least the satisfaction is increasing. And through this podcast and the Builder 20 group and meeting other builders across the country, we kind of improve upon our business standards and practices and do a little bit better in that regard. The in the field stuff we know like the back of our hand.
Yeah.
The business stuff is where we probably lacked a little bit, but that's coming back up on par with our experience, and yeah, that's kind of transparent or coming through in our level of builds. We seem to be getting higher and higher end builds, which is awesome. It's fun, even though they take longer, and you're stuck in a project for maybe 2 years from design till you finish. It's still really rewarding at the end when you just build these awesome houses and you can kind of take pride. And like we're doing a house now, and my carpenter's just finished a ceiling in a foyer. It's like a 45-foot high ceiling with some shiplap and beams. And I was over there like every hour.
Actual carpenter, not a sub?
No, this is a sub. This is a sub. Our in-house carpenter that we hired, he is a trim carpenter, but we use him for more than just trim carpentry. But this was my trim carpenter, my trim sub. And they just did such an amazing job on this ceiling. I can't wait to post all the pictures about it, but it's so cool. And I posted on Instagram, man, I wish I was a trim carpenter someday.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's just the satisfaction you get out of building something like that. I guess different strokes for different.
Will you have to scale back if you start taking on more demanding builds as far as volume, like numbers of houses that you're doing?
I don't think so. It depends on location. So a lot of the stuff we have in the pipeline right now are close to one another. They might be slightly bigger than what we're doing now, but honestly, is there really a ton of difference between a house that's 5,000 square foot and a house that's 8,000 square foot as far from the GC side? Not really. I mean, there's more work, obviously.
Comes down to details. Like if you're going into higher end builds with more details, that's going to be more consuming of your time than a simpler build.
Sure.
Or is it like, I guess is the argument that your trades understand what your criteria is at this point?
They do. I mean, it's still trust but verify.
Yeah.
But they understand.
Is most of your what is most of your time during the day? Like, what are you doing
listening to the Modern Craftsman?
Well, on the go.
This is about it. You're looking at it.
I try and get in the office 1 day a week. Usually it ends up being 2 like half days or 2 quarter days, just to review draws. That's pretty much it. Like selections and sign-offs. I usually do
on
that
site.
On site, I'm on site every day.
I know, but what is your, when you show up on the job site, what are you doing? Like,
I'm making sure who's supposed to show up shows up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making sure that they're set up for what they need to do, making sure all the materials are there. I'm the guy that orders the materials, so if it's not, it's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Every job?
Every
or just
job.
your jobs?
No, just my jobs. My jobs. John does it for his. Making sure they show up, making sure it's done right. So you're inspecting as you're walking through. You try and catch the mistakes before they become mistakes or while they're installing. We don't always do that. Sometimes we have to rip shit out. But it's part and parcel for the course. Then I'll go to the next job and do the same exact thing. So luckily, when they're really close, when it takes you literally 4 minutes to go to the next job, it's easy. I've got 2 jobs out west now. So let's say I was building 2 houses in Norwell, and now I got to drive out to downtown Boston for the next 2 jobs. That's probably as far as we go, as far as our jobs are separated. So when it's close, it's easy.
Yeah.
And when we were building subdivisions for my dad, John and I would be running 30 or 35 houses. And they're all in a subdivision. It's easy.
Who was it? Was it on this podcast we were talking about track building. No, I think no, it was actually at that SWOT analysis that we did out in Scottsdale, and we were talking about this whole track home or like production building. And there was this comment made that everyone, if you want to be a really good super, you should spend time in production building, because what you get to experience in that process is you're closing out 35 homes a month. You're seeing construction happen start to finish 35 times a month, where in residential, like what we do, Mike, it's you're on a build for 2 years. So some of like my guys are on one job for 2 years. They're seeing a foundation once every 2 years. And it's like when you get put into this production, like you're watching 30 foundations go in. It's like you are exposed to so much more education at such a faster rate.
That's a good point.
Maybe the quality, like you can't hit that same level of quality, nor is the expectation to. But that production mentality is, it was just such an interesting comment. And I'm like, of course, I'm like, all right, how do I send some of my guys to go into the production world and then have them come back just to like learn, which is like, it's not really that feasible. But the point is like, it is interesting. And, and for the sake of this conversation, I think production building, everyone, razzes on it. It's like, oh, they're, it's shit quality, blah, blah. Yeah, sure. There's poor quality work out there, but the reality is, and I think that we need to be reminded of this kind of often, is that what we're doing, there's a good majority of the population that doesn't want what we do. Most people just want a normal ass house. They don't need a custom home. They don't need anything fancy. Just give me a roof and protection. And that's okay. And that's why these production builders build so many homes. Is that
budget? It comes down to budget. It comes down to what they can afford. I'm sure there's people out there that if they could afford those houses, they would take them.
I'm with you, but I do think that even if money was no object, I think that the majority of the population would not spend it on a house.
Probably, yeah.
I think that most of them would be like, no, I don't need a crazy house. I think that people who appreciate architecture and design, like, yes, they're gonna want something nicer. Or, the people that can't afford something, they're just gonna look for big, or like, how much can I get for, it's not gonna be about building a high quality home, I guess is where I'm going with it. It's not so much quality driven, it might be size driven.
Or they buy a yacht, something like that.
Yeah. Are you pulling your same subs from one job to the next? Is that part of the scheduling?
Yeah, but we're at the amount of projects now where we have to bring a second set of subs in, which kind of sucks because there's a little bit of a learning curve.
Are they able to work for other contractors?
Yeah. I mean, I don't stop them from working whoever they want to.
I mean, if you're keeping them busy enough.
Some of them don't. Some of them are just with us. But some of them do work with other contractors, which is fine. I don't care. As long as we get the service. You made a great point, Nick, on one of your previous podcasts about how can I make your job more efficient? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a question I'm going to ask my guys. I thought that was a great question, because if you make your sub happy, they're going to give you the preference,
right?
Builder A is calling them to come in and build, and you're calling them to come in, and you're making their life easy, and they know all the material is going to be there, and there's questions are going to be answered. Who they're going to go with the guy that's more organized,
right? And when you ask anyone else, it's like, or whoever yells the loudest ends up getting the service. It's like, well, why are you yelling?
That's why I lose out to cousin Johnny when we're fighting for subs.
Johnny's yelling at me. I gotta go.
Oh, yeah, he's a yeller. He's a screamer.
I mean, yeah, there's no doubt like that does play in people's decision making, but and I've seen it firsthand. But ultimately, if you're more organized and you have a job set up better for a sub, like, you're making the job easier.
Yeah. And as builders, we are going to be forced to do that in the next decades, because the labor pool is dwindling.
And it's going,
Qualified.
and I don't think it's going to ever grow.
No.
Like I don't believe that we're gonna all of a sudden see this resurgence of people that are getting back into it, and we're growing at like it's not gonna be this exponential growth. It's like we might see an uptick, but we're never gonna be back to where we were.
What
And
if there's just not enough people and you are essentially able to name your price? Do you think that there'll be more attraction to the industry?
That's what I think is going to happen.
no, because I think that technology will grow faster than that. And I think that technology will replace more of construction. And I don't mean like a robot's going to show up and frame a wall with studs 16 on center. I mean that the walls are no longer going to be stick built. They're going to be coming out of a machine on a factory floor.
Yeah, but I'd like, so what about there? A lot of what you build is built because it's handmade and there's an artisan involved, and without getting into the, you know, the diatribe of what is craftsmanship and everything else, there's a lot of things that people are willing to pay a premium for because of what it is. And
Those
I
guys
think
will be able to name their price.
exactly. And I mean, I would imagine that a lot of what we do and what we charge and the type of work that we do is associated with the handmade aspect of it, and there's value there for customers. It's like paying for a piece of art. So what happens when those people aren't around and essentially there's an opportunity for people to make money and somebody steps in and starts training people to be able to perform a certain task because they can make a ton of money doing it? I think that that's an opportunity for people to get into our industry. I don't see many other options or many other paths leading towards that other than somebody from out of the industry seeing an opportunity to make a shitload of money and then putting resources in place to do so. Like, I'd love to think that everyone's going to have this massive impact on what we do and on the craftsmanship of what we're doing, but until people make more money and can charge more money, nobody's going to do it.
100%.
Show me the money.
Yeah.
It's true. Like, why? And I can't blame anyone, but what, right? Mike said that he loves doing this. That's great. But you also have to be able to support a family. And you can love doing this for a really long time, and that will dull a certain amount of pain. But when you've had so much, or like breaking into the market, if you're like, well, you can make this much and you can have these liberties and this type of lifestyle, a 18 to 20-year-old kid isn't going to be like, you know what, let me go into construction and let me get my ass chewed out and not make any money and be dirty and tired every day.
I think you're 100% right. I mean, I love what I'm doing, but if tomorrow I could go make donuts and make 900,000 a year making donuts, I would go make donuts.
Yeah.
And I would build one house for a hobby.
Yeah.
It is
Like,
about the money.
It is.
Of course. I mean, like because we are reliant on it. I think, Tyler, your point about, we're going to create this demand of, people see the opportunity to make a lot of money in this industry because there's a lack of it. Yeah, for sure. But I think that we're going to continue to lose people almost at the same rate.
Yeah.
Because there's ways to make $900,000 making donuts or selling on Amazon, whatever the case is, right?
But whatever the kids are doing these days.
Foot modeling.
The reality is it's backbreaking work, and you have to there has to be that passion tied to it, where it's like the guys that are making a decent, like a good living on this, it's because they have a passion for it and they've figured out how to make money at it.
Mike, what would you be willing to pay somebody to come in and fulfill your duties? If you were like, you know what, I want out and I'm willing to pay somebody to come in here and take over my aspect of the business and not have to do shit.
That's a great question.
And him still have a income from the company?
Yeah. I mean, that would be up to him how much he wants to make on top of that. But like, if you could find somebody to replace you, what would you be willing to pay them?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can answer it. It'd be a lot. It would be a lot.
That
Our fee structure would have to change. We don't.
But would it like? So I'm thinking. I'm like, all right. Let me average out the income that I make now, and then if I were to take that and pay someone that dollar amount, and meaning I would have $0 left over for myself, but I would have all of my time back. Wouldn't I then be able to compound that and use that time on something else while everything else continues to run at 100%?
So you can make the donuts while you're building.
Make the donuts.
I don't know. I love it though.
I feel like I'd pay every dollar that I make, and I feel like and that would give you all your time back to whatever you jump back in the business in a totally different role.
I would assume that if you're valuable enough to your business that you wouldn't have to pay somebody every dollar that you make, and you'd be able to pay them a lower rate to do that. That we're still desirable to them to come work for you, but it's like you have so much on your plate and so much responsibility. You'd have to pay somebody a lot of money to do what you're doing. And are you able?
Have to be plural.
Yeah, and like, are you able to make money on top of that? And that's what's tough.
Not in this market. I have this discussion with guys in other parts of the country all the time. There's no such thing as charging for supervision in our jobs.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I just had somebody call me who I went to high school with, and he bought a house, and he's looking to do it's not like a full. It's a weird house, but he's looking to change the layout, add a couple bathrooms, and it's not a huge job. Maybe it's $100,000, $150,000 worth of work, but he got a hold of 3 different contractors, one of which is somebody who builds houses and does larger scale renovations. And he was asking me why his number is so high. And I was just on a conversation with him on the phone. I was like, he doesn't do that type of work, so he probably has management on top of that. And he's looking through his numbers, and he's paying for a PM to be on the job for 4 months. And it just takes his price and puts him way out of the window of what everyone else is charging. Mm-hmm. And I even look at when I price jobs, like, it's probably the last 18 months that I'm actually I'm charging a management fee on top of my markup for my subs, because it took me 7-10 years to realize that my markup on my subs is not covering the time that I'm spending managing my subs on site. And when you start adding those numbers in, it oftentimes does take you out of that budget that people are willing to pay.
Yeah. Well, is your friend from Chicago? Because that's how it is here.
No, but like, when he told me the numbers, there was quite a disparity there. And it was obvious that the business that he got pricing from wasn't set up to be doing small scale business like this. And when you put the cost of a qualified PM on a job for 4 months, whether it's a small job or a large job, that fee is not going to change. Their time is sitting there. But it was crazy to think, like, yeah, if you put that number on top of $150,000 job, they're not in the same price point as everyone else.
Mike, if you had if you could charge for supervision and you had a full-time super on a job site, say Johnny was on one site, do you think that job would go smoother, faster, less expensive, better quality?
It'd have to be better quality if you had someone there full-time. I mean, we do catch a lot of stuff, catch a lot of shit, but we are not on the job 24/7. Mm-hmm. We're there for a few hours every day, and we're there on the weekends sometimes. So it would have to. I mean, if you have someone looking nonstop, the quality would go up.
And you don't think that the cost what? The
cost would go up because we'd have to charge for supervision.
So and you don't think there's any clientele that would pay that for a higher quality than you're already producing?
They're few and far between.
Yeah.
They're few and far between.
Which I don't think is a project.
Every project we have is competitively bid.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
It's great. We had this conversation yesterday. We had we walked a new architect through our teak project because we've been wanting to work with them for a long time. and I was chatting to him about our pre-construction process, and I outlined it, and he's like, let me just give you the spiel. And I understand why you guys all want to be involved super early, but the reality is that even if someone trusts you, they have nothing to base that trust on when it comes to cost. So oftentimes, when they price with one builder, they're getting that price and they're like, that I have no reason not to believe him, but like, how do I know if this is within market? And he goes on to say, he's like, we're not looking to competitively bid our projects. We're not. But when we price, we don't want the builder involved until we have a schematic pricing set. And at that point, we will inform 3 builders and we will let the client, choose. And we're going to tell each of those builders that, hey, listen, we're not bidding this. This is designed to be a cost estimation. And the decision isn't based on, ideally isn't based on the lowest cost, but sometimes clients make that decision based on lowest cost. But it's designed to be this period that a client gets to understand the cost estimation of what this project's going to cost. And also if it is truly over budget, which it usually is, you're going to see that 3 different ways rather than one builder coming to you. I had a builder tell the client right in front of us that they were the candy and we were the dentist, meaning they were going to deliver all the good candy. And that when we priced it and we were done with it, it was like going to the dentist and getting your cavities filled. And I laughed in the meeting, but I was like, dude, that's not a good setup. And ultimately we end up losing that job, not because of that comment, but because they designed this amazing thing and they priced it with us and they just thought we were off base. They're like, you're too expensive.
Yeah.
I'm like, where you designed it.
How the hell are you competitively bidding all of these jobs while doing all of this work?
That's a way better question.
I was just like sitting here thinking about since he dropped that, I didn't realize that was the case.
I mean, yesterday I got a plan. 2 days ago, I got a plan to bid. I met the clients on Wednesday, well, a few days ago, and met them. They said they're going to talk to 3 builders. They gave me the plan.
I think you're busy because today's Tuesday. I think you got too much going on.
It's Monday when everyone's hearing this. But I send the plans out to bid. It takes me about 4 weeks to get all my prices back in and to put together a budget statement. And then I won't do my complete spec sheet, my detailed spec sheet until I know I have the job. So I'll give them like a Cliff Note version of my specs and the price. And if I get it,
lump sum.
No, everything's open book now. And
but in your proposal, it's line itemed.
No, I don't give them that. I don't give them that.
So what is that like in that proposal? It's one number. Like, hey, it's $5.4 million.
Yeah.
And here, based on these,
this is what our fee is, our percentages, and
got it.
Blah blah blah.
And what have you done?
Most of the competitive bids that we do, I think maybe 80% of the people know they want to go with us, but they need that security, that check number to know and we're not always the cheapest one.
Yeah.
They still choose us because they want the level of quality. They trust us. And
that's what I was going to ask you. What are you doing at that point to ensure that you're not just burning time? Like when customers come to you, you're not bidding every project that lands on your plate, right?
Not everyone. Everyone we take in, we turn away jobs right away that we won't even look at.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, you're vetting at some point so that when you say you're competitively bidding, you're not competitively bidding every project that comes across your plate.
No.
So what
it's
what
a
you have
3,500 square foot house and the person has $1 million budget, I'm just gonna say we're not going to be competitive. We're not going to bid this.
What else are you using to vet those customers when these leads come across your plate to ensure that you're not wasting your time and your subs time, being that you're in a competitively bid market?
Well, we meet with them. We ask them what their budget is to see if they're, have in reality or not. And then it's kind of just feel. We've been doing it long enough where they ask the right questions. We know they're serious. I Google them. I look them up in LinkedIn, see what kind of job they have. If they're making donuts, maybe they don't want to have a $5 million house. I don't know.
It's and that's interesting. That's something that I do, and I always ask people their address. And I spoke about this on the separate podcast where it may sound controversial and somewhat off-putting to customers, but I'm Googling their address and Zillowing their home and seeing what it's worth. And that's not to pass judgment, more so to save them and myself time. And, if you have a $250,000 house, you're not going to spend $150,000 on your kitchen.
Right.
Maybe somebody will, but one, I don't want to be the person selling them that job because I don't think it's a sound financial investment. And two, I have to play to the numbers. If I can only do so much work in a year, my opportunity of landing the type of job that I want is going to be better spent on somebody who's in $1 million to $2 million house than somebody who's in a $250,000 house. So I at some point have to put these walls in place to salvage the amount of time that I have, and prevent just a massive waste of potential customers' time as well as mine. And you're meeting with potential customers too. I feel like there's got to be more people behind the scenes. I don't even meet with customers. And I'm like, I can handle a job. Honestly, all kidding aside, that's impressive, and it would be a testament to what you guys have done and what you've done in your career, and having some production background, to be able to have the systems in place to keep all of your ducks in a row and ensure that subs are in place when they need to be, materials are in place when they need to be, and be able to handle 5 jobs at a time on a larger scale, remodels, new builds. If you aren't in the industry and you don't do this, that would be very overwhelming.
For sure.
There's a lot of things involved, and looking at new work and ensuring that everything that you need to operate on your own as a business, it's not just about the 5 jobs that are on your plate. It's about the 5 that you need for the next year, and everything with your own business. So that's a lot going on. And I want to ensure that people understand that. Well, are you using software?
We use Buildertrend. We use about 10% of its capacity. Well, I should say I use Buildertrend.
John, what are you using it for?
Scheduling. I used to use it for selection sign-offs, but I found it to be a little cumbersome because we're custom, we're not semi-custom.
Yeah.
So it's just as easy for me to put everything into like a PDF, make a Google slide, a PDF, and then upload it to DocuSign and have them literally sign right on whatever selection is, a roofing selection, cabinet sign off. It's just easier than using Buildertrend in that regard.
And what does the scheduling look like on the Buildertrend? And is that with your subs?
Yeah, it's just a job schedule, and mainly the subs don't use it. I don't have it set up where it pings my subs. When I first started using it, I did, and they were getting like 100 million emails. Yeah. Every time there was a schedule change, they're like, get me off that thing. So it's just for me. I also open it up to the client so they can kind of see the schedule where it's falling, more so that they're on time with all their selections. The designers that they have, they're usually one of the vendors that's can view the schedule. That keeps them on task and making sure they have the selections done when we need them.
So you're building that out for every project, or is there?
I have a template. I have a template that I use, and then I adjust when it starts. I adjust it.
Yeah.
It probably takes 45 minutes to adjust the schedule, and then you're adjusting it every week.
Yeah,
because it always moves.
All right. So you also said you have a lot of owner involvement with your projects.
Yeah,
what's that?
I kind of tout that as our edge over our competitors. So a lot of our competitors have construction managers and superintendents where we don't. So if someone walks on the job, they're not talking to the owner, they're talking to that project manager, whoever it is. Where if they walk on our job, they're talking to me or they're talking to John. And
it's funny because, and no, like, there's nothing wrong with it, but like, that's what you use as your selling point.
Yeah.
where it's like, and then I'm using the other side where it's like I have a full-time super, so you're not relying on getting in touch with me. You have a dedicated person on this job.
Yeah.
And it's
that's up to
like,
the client to decide what's better, right?
totally.
But I know when I go to an attorney, or if I go to a financial planner, or if I go to any other profession, I want to talk to the head guy in charge. I don't
I
want to
mean,
talk
I
to
An
even
other
from
people.
like
attorney? Those
from
guys are no. I'll pay, I'll pay the $400 an hour, not the $850.
But even like if you think of it from a subcontractor standpoint, most of my most successful subs, the owner is still working, or the
Yeah.
owner's on site every day.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And it makes a big, and I mean, Nick, you have to understand that, because this was
Totally.
a large pinch point with you growing, was how are customers are hiring me, NS Builders, for Nick, and now I'm not on the job every day, and you had to figure out how to navigate that. So
I'm in awe of how you're handling it, Nick, because it's I fight that all the time. If we want to like grow, do more projects, that's what's going to have to happen. But I don't think I want to do that. I
So
think
this
the
is
only
Go ahead. No, finish your
the only
thought.
successful person you're doing it now, but Brad from AFT is doing it, or he's not on the jobs, but he's
Yeah.
got all his project managers, but he's paying through the nose to those guys, because they're good. And it's just not, that markup is not in my market. There's no way I could do that and win jobs. I cannot get those fees to pay for someone that's good to watch my jobs as good as John and I are going to watch them.
I'm going to answer a couple things to that. Number one, if we did not charge for supervision, we would have a lot more work on our plate. No doubt. We price ourselves out of work constantly. And something we talked about in the last podcast is that, in that business model, like what you have to do, or what we have to do, is focus on working with people that have those funds, that we're not working at the top of their financial capacity. Because when you when you are charging a premium for your general conditions, which would include supervision, project management, et cetera, you are working for a clientele that is asking for a white glove service, where it's like I have priced up against guys that have been half of what we were. And when you break down why, like what the cost was, it was related to our GCs. And our GCs are, Procore cost, supervision, project management, construction administration. Like all of those things are broken out into the job cost, because it's a true job cost. Where the other guy might be someone like you, Mike, where it's like he's a guy, he's running the job, he is the guy. He's got no additional payroll overhead. There's no additional payroll on your job, so you're gonna be more competitive. So there's no doubt, like we could have way more inbound work if we were to be lean and mean like Mike. But from the thing that I've learned about separating myself from the business, because you're right, Tyler, I was worried about that. And I've had some really tough conversations with clients about that, where, they've said the cliche, like, when I hired you, I was expecting you. And, your knee-jerk reaction to that is, I need to be on site. I need to be on site. I need to run the show. Like, I got to fire these guys. I'll do it myself. That's what they're hiring for. When the reality is there just needs to be a better expectation set. And for me, we've set that expectation that we're like handing off this baton, and we've done that. And then I get the phone call randomly from a client. I'm like, that's weird. Why are they calling me? And I get hey, Nick, I'm not feeling too hot right now. I feel like there's a couple things going on, and I really would appreciate if you were involved in this. To realize that my best role in allowing my team to be in charge, the lead contact on the job site, the lead supervisor on the job site, they need to be in that role, but I should be involved in, say, the meetings. So for me, I try to be in every client meeting, at the very minimum, every other client meeting, the OAC meeting, right? So, and I tend to do my best to keep quiet, and I'm there as a resource. Sometimes I'll chime in, especially if people are like beating around the bush about something. I'll just cut to the chase and, let's make a solution. Who's doing what, rather than like, who's doing that? All right, we'll discuss it later on. It's like, no, he's doing it. We're moving on from this topic, next topic. But ultimately, when I'm in that meeting, the client's like, oh, next year, and has communicated that, like, hey, I appreciate you just being in those meetings, because sometimes I know your team makes great decisions, but early in the process, you were the one that kind of got us to the start line, and I appreciated your input on things, where sometimes your team doesn't maybe have the not knowledge, but the
Wisdom, experience,
confidence. Thank you. The confidence to just make a decision, instead might revert back to like an internal meeting and then come back with a solution where, I can be quick to make that decision and help move progress. So for me, like I retracted 100% and it hurt me. But then I try to be all in, and then it hurt me because I couldn't grow. And then it was like, all right, I just need to set really clear expectations on who's in charge of what. And then I'll be in the background. I'll be in the meeting. When a client flies into town to have a site meeting, I hop on site, and those meetings can be 2 to 3 hours, and I'll usually hang out for an hour. And if I feel as though at that point, there's no other high profile things, I excuse myself. I say, hey, is there anything else you'd like me to address? I have another meeting I got to run to. And it's not perfect, but the expectations, but still remaining involved is what has been far more successful than trying to just shut it off. Because I think too many people try to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you also have to deliver what you're intending and promising on delivering, right? I don't think there's going to be an issue if you're delivering a project that's on budget, on schedule, and up to par with what they agreed upon. I think you're going to run into issues when things start to slip, and they assume that if you were handling this, that wouldn't be the case. And then you just tell them, hey, you know what? It'd still be a shit show. Even it'd probably be more of a shit show if I was here. But so with your business, Mike, and you said that essentially this is a huge selling point for you, and having the owner involved. And I kind of think of myself and the way that my business is structured, and long term creating some autonomy there and being able to not be the main source of contact. And I think more importantly, what do you think the future holds for bringing value to your customers if you were not such an owner-facing company?
I have no idea. I don't know what it's like to not be that way. I don't know how long I can do this that way as well. As I get older.
You have kids?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've got six girls.
Oh my God.
See who I'm chasing, Tyler?
I mean, it makes more sense and less sense at the same time.
It's like my comment the other day. 1 kid, 4 kids. What's the difference? It's the same thing.
Well, it's like you got 6 kids. It's never ending. You got
once you go from man to man to zone defense, it's all the same.
But
my wife does all the heavy lifting there. She does all the heavy lifting when it comes to the kids. So I'm lucky in that regard. I can get away from the house and do what I need to do. I get a little flack every now and again, but
how old are they?
Probably deservedly so. My oldest is 22 and my youngest is 13, and they're all in between. So yeah, I'm old.
Hard question. Do you spend as much time with them as you'd like to?
No.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, that's like where the whole sacrifice comes in.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult. And so one of the questions I had to you was, if you had an opportunity to do a lower volume but make the same amount of money, would you kind of chase that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I mean, I would assume.
Is there a market for that? I mean, like, sorry to cut you off, Tyler, but like, if you're doing, say, $4 million homes on the regular,
I was thinking just move back to Boston.
Yeah, watch out, Nick.
Let's go.
Watch out. I'm gonna be the guy that's 100% owner involved.
Yeah, we priced it with you and Greenside out of Chicago. No, they moved to Quincy. That son of a bitch.
He's originally from there. His parents came over on the Mayflower.
You're not originally from Boston. He's originally from Boston.
I think I have that conversation with my wife weekly. Like, where are we going to go?
Really?
Are we going to go to California? Are we going to go to Arizona? Are we going to go to Boston? And
It's just, I mean, the cost of living can't be inexpensive for you in Chicago.
it's not bad. The Midwest, it's not crazy. I know it's one of the larger cities in the country, but it compared to LA and New York, compared to Boston, it's inexpensive.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like so that being the case, it's going to be the same shit. You're going to move somewhere and it's going to cost you more to live. So it just, I feel like, offsets it.
True, but there'll be views, mountains, oceans, something.
That's true. That's what I feel like in New Jersey.
We've got cornfields here.
Yeah, we pay all this money and pay all this money in taxes, and it's not even pretty. There's nothing pretty. But
back to your question, I don't even know what that looks like. I don't even know how I would step away or step back. Maybe I go to Nick and he gives me some pointers. I don't know, but I don't even know if I want to do it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I'm happy at building 10 houses a year and going how we're going right now. And I mean, I enjoy it. So I don't feel like I'm overworked. I don't feel like I work a ton of hours. I mean, I do, but I don't feel that way. And when I have to step back and take a day off or do something with the kids, I do. That's part of being an owner. And if I'm away from it more than a week, luckily I have a partner that can keep an eye on things. If John and I weren't partners, that would throw a wrench into it.
Is he a true business partner?
Oh yeah. 50-50.
50-50. So going, like you said, you don't feel like you're overworked, but going back to the comment about you get a little flack. So what is most of that flack for?
Not being home.
When
the kids are being a pain in the ass, which is always.
No, just like she does all the driving. She drives me to the game. I haven't gone to a ton of games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lot like my dad was, and that's kind of one. You're just like your dad. He was Irish guy. He didn't believe in going to every one of my games and driving me to all my practices, and there was none of that. He was a little more tougher. He was tougher than that, and I was working. He had me on bulldozers loading trucks when I was 13 years old. I mean, he had me out there early, and it was teaching me how to work. Part of that was my personality. I enjoyed work, and I just stuck with it. But I'm a lot like him in that regard when it comes to parenting. Can't believe I'm talking about parenting on the podcast, but that's where I get a lot of the flack, is maybe not being at home as much as I should.
Well, I think that it comes into play, especially having a family, a wife, and kids, because we are working to provide a lifestyle for everyone, but we're also working to fulfill our own desires and our own needs and to feel successful as a man, as a human being. And I think that like a generation or two ago, like you said, this isn't anything that you would have to consider as being a provider. It was expected of you to go and to work and to provide for the family, and the wife stayed home. And things are obviously different now and changed, and so you're exposed to this different lifestyle and the potential of what could be. But 50 years ago, you wouldn't be doing anything that were different than anybody else. You'd probably be working less. A lot of guys had 2 jobs, and seeing the way that things are now and how life is different, it makes you question how much of what you're doing is for yourself, how much of what you're doing is to provide, and where that delicate balance somewhat lies.
It's what I am doing is to provide. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, so I can afford to raise 6 kids and keep her at home, and that takes work. I mean, I can't do that from home. So I guess that's a big part of it. Maybe I'm a little old-fashioned.
But I mean, if that's the agreement that you guys have developed and that's what works for your family, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think the problem lies when somebody doesn't want that lifestyle, or you're resentful because you can't spend time with the kids and you have to go out and provide, or your wife's home with the kids all day and she can't stand them anymore. I think that if you guys have a relationship and a dynamic that caters to each other's needs, and your understanding of what each person, what their duties are, and kind of what they need out of life, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, for me, I look at it where I look at long term, what I want, what the kids want, if they were given the option, and then when, 50 years from now, I look back on life, what I potentially could regret. And I think that I use a combination of those factors to make a decision to head in the direction that I think is right, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. It's difficult. I mean, you should have stopped at like 2 to 3 kids also.
TV was broken. The TV was broken.
There's really not that much. There's nobody to blame at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
You are old, because my parents always said that joke. My mom, I used to be mortified growing up. So I was one of 5, and my parents had 5 kids very quickly. And my mom's big joke when we got older was that she got Mike, which was her husband. So she always used to say to people, I got Mike and I got my husband and the TV fixed. And I didn't know what it meant until I was a little bit older. And I'm like, she used to say that to everyone.
I'm going to use that one.
In hindsight, mortified about it.
I've never heard that joke.
Yeah.
That's a good one. How old are you guys? In your 30s, I assume, somewhere?
37.
34.
Oh, babies.
I know.
Babies.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the the question I was going to ask is like shrinking the market, or shrinking how many projects you're doing for a larger margin. Is there a market for it where it's like, could you, whether you're building larger scale homes, or you're just doing the same exact ones, but you're doing less of them at a higher dollar value?
There probably is. There are houses being built in my market that are more expensive than what I'm building.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten there yet.
What do you think's limiting you?
6 kids.
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe because I haven't built up there, you just have to slowly progress. We're not all on a rocket ship like you, Nick, but it might get there. And I'm not advertising to that yet.
Yeah.
I'm not pushing it. Maybe if I push it more, but I'm perfectly content where I'm.
You also don't know if that's the answer.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
It's the same percentage. Probably. It's just you're working off a bigger number. So yeah, there's more money to be made.
Sure.
I mean, it may consume more of your time. Like
how much do you need? I mean, want and need are 2 different things.
Yeah.
I don't need to be the most successful builder in the world or the richest builder in the world. I'd rather have a good reputation. And when I'm dead, someone says that guy built a good house.
Yeah.
I'd rather have that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the goal would be, with kind of the path that you're suggesting, Nick, to be able to spend less time and make a little bit better margins. But at this point in Mike's career,
I'm just getting started, Tyler. Don't make me...
with his experience and his past experience, to kind of chase down a different market and see what that looks like. You may end up doing less work from a volume perspective, but the customers are more demanding.
Yeah.
The level of finish is more time consuming with hours that you're not getting paid for. And at the end of the day, it's like, for what?
Maybe it's a different market. I've got 6 years left here till my daughter's in college, the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
I could very easily be somewhere else. It might happen.
Yeah, and that's an interesting. I mean, that like 6 years isn't that long.
No, I'm a fly.
That's scary.
And I'm not even saying that like you obviously need to change. Like Mike, you and I have chatted plenty of times one-on-one, and it's more of just like a conversation. But it's always interesting to me. And listen, I don't think outside looking in, we probably look like we're on a rocket ship. I don't feel like I'm on a rocket ship. I feel like I bash my head against the wall every day, just like everyone else. and I'm still trying to break into different markets. We're just promoting at a rocket level, so it's like everything is being promoted. The other day you messaged me and was like, hey, do more of these stories to show everyone how much you got going on. And I laughed because I forget why I decided to sit there and post everything. But either way, I was like, I don't feel like I have enough going on. And part of the reason I posted all that because I wanted to like drum up some interest and be like, hey, I want to build. And that's always what I'm doing. And when you said that, I'm like, man, did I just block like 5 people from reaching out? Be like, oh, that dude's way too busy. Like we cannot, we
No, I
cannot
don't.
reach out.
I don't find that.
No,
that
and
happens.
but my point is like from the outside looking in, that's your perception. And is that we're on this rocket ship where it's like, no, we're still grinding and trying to get to the level that we eventually want to in different verticals too, right? We're going to build on spec and then we're continuing to build custom.
Do you ever run into that? Sorry.
No, and my point in asking about like the market in your place, like, do you have that opportunity to grow there? It's like, yeah, I mean, that's just more of a question. If you're content, like that, just to set the record, like, leave it. Refine what you have. The more people I talk to, especially on the podcast and even off the podcast, I realize that one thing that we do in this industry is that we're so quick to get someone to the sale. Like we have to sell this job. We have to sell this job. And oftentimes, especially in our industry, we sell the job at a budget that we know we're not going to hit. And, and I don't know why I've been using this term. Someone used it with me one time and it's just been stuck in my head, but it's like, we're quick to get them pregnant. And then once they're pregnant, and then it's like,
I know all about that.
By the way, it's, we're actually 10, 20% over our original budget. And then it's all these difficult conversations and change orders and stress and anxiety. And then next thing you know, they don't like you because they feel like you basically bait and switch them. And I see that a lot in our industry. And, I mean,
that's the part of it that I really dislike. We are really upfront and honest and about budget, and our projects, they go over budget, but they don't go over budget by a lot.
Right.
We are very forthright when we start, and during the process, we're telling them, hey, you want to spend, you're nuts. Why are you spending this kind of money on this tile when you can have this tile and it looks just as well? And you're building it out over market. You're going to lose money when you sell the house. And that's part of our appeal too, I think, because we're kind of blunt. John is much more blunt than I am. And he'll tell them straight to their face, are you nuts? Why are you doing this? So I think that's a huge part of why we're getting the clients that we get.
Do you ever, so the only downside that I've ever found, other than what we've kind of discussed as far as the difficulties separating yourself from business when you are so involved as an owner, but do you ever run into customers finding out your workload, what you have going on, and having a concern for your ability to devote time to their project?
Yeah. I probably get that question from almost every client. How many jobs do you have on? And I tell them 10 is what we can effectively run at. And that's where we run at.
So it's essentially the conversation is, this is what we've done. This is the work that you've seen, the level, the caliber of work that we're doing has been at that production rate, not production rate, that the capacity of the work that we're doing has been at that volume for so long. So you're not hiring us for anything different than we've ever done.
Yeah. I met with some clients yesterday, or potential clients, father and son, and I met with them probably 18 months ago, priced out their house. It was a competitive bid again. There was like 6 other builders that bid it. And when it was all said and done, I told them, hey, we can't take on this project. We don't have the capacity right now, maybe in a year. And they called back. They waited. And looks like we're going to get those 2 bills right now, right next door to each other, which is great. But if I wasn't honest at the start and say, hey, we can't take this on, and we took it on at that time, it could have been not disaster, but we could have been overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I'm like, in my head, I'm just, and it came back to work out, but in my head, I'm like, why were you even bidding this job to begin with that you didn't have the capacity to do.
Well,
and
I
you have
wasn't
enough
sure at
work
the
on your
time.
plate. And I'm like, there's 6 other builders. I would have been like, see ya. I'm out of here. I'm not wasting my time on that. I mean, obviously it's working out for you.
It's just what we're used to. That's
yeah,
the
I
way it
know.
is.
I guess I'm just so selfish with my time that I'm just not willing. I'm a dick. I'm like not willing to do that for people because I'm like, I'd rather spend that time doing something for myself or for my family rather than to help you out, where it's like, you're 6 other people. Seriously, what do you think about me? If you like, we like you, but we want to see what these other 5 people have to offer. Like, what if your wife came to you and said that? Like, Mike, I really like you, but there's these 5 other guys that I kind of want to test the waters with first. Probably walk away.
Well, if she said that after we were married, when she was
No,
my
no.
wife, it probably would bother me.
Yeah.
But before we were married, that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
Hey, the best
Let's
guy
ask
wins.
her. Is she there? Get her on the podcast. You're a better man than I am.
One thing I wanted to get to too, to take up some of your time, to take up more of my time, is I've started a podcast, and Nick was kind enough to say, hey, he'd let me plug it a little bit.
Absolutely.
this
That
podcast.
was my next question.
Oh, see that?
You beat me to it. Yeah. What? So first and foremost, you should have given me a heads up, because here I am on my Explore feed, and I'm like, who is this guy starting a construction podcast? And I click on it, and it's him. And I'm like, what is this about? And he's like, oh yeah,
the jury's still out. It might crash and burn.
We started it, but no. What's the name of it?
So it's called the Level Heads Podcast. It's actually gonna be released on Friday.
Amazing. So Friday,
the Friday after this, the Friday before this podcast will come out. So you guys release
February
on Monday,
3rd.
right?
It would already be out.
Yeah.
So
February 3rd.
The name The Level Heads came from the Builder 20 group I'm in. It's called The Level Heads. And the 2 other guys that I'm doing the podcast with, Zane Ellis and Jamie Verdura. I think Jamie's been on your podcast.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's in our Builder 20 group. So one drunken evening after one of our meetings, we decided we were going to have a podcast. And part of it came in because we thought the other construction podcasts were missing something. And not to knock you guys, but your podcast kind of changed a little bit after Johnny left. And there was something lost, I think. I think you guys have rebounded pretty well in the last couple of months with the direction you're going. But we wanted to create a podcast that wasn't as serious, a little more lighthearted, because you guys are tackling some serious, I wouldn't call them issues, but subjects in the construction world, craftsmen and craftsmanship and labor force, and your branding, you're widening your branding. So I think where you're going is good, but where we're starting off, we're kind of like newbies. We're rough around the edges, and it's more about casual conversations. We have weekly guests on. We have a bunch that we've recorded already, so they're going to drop in the next couple of days.
Is it once a week the intent to
once a week for now? It might end up being once every 2 weeks, depending on our guest schedule. We've got some pretty nice guests lined up, so it should be fun. We'll see. We're learning. It's going to be a shit show when we first start, but
sounds right.
You guys are welcome to come on anytime.
Yeah,
and give us some pointers.
Where is it going to be? Like the standard Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff right off the bat?
Yeah. So cool. Zane from Collective Build, he's the boss, I keep calling him. He's kind of running all that technical side of it.
Nice.
Jamie and I just show up to talk. But it's a good mix. Jamie's West Coast. Zane is in Tennessee and Knoxville. I'm in Chicago. So we've got the country kind of covered and different markets covered. So it should be interesting. Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
That's exciting.
Any advice?
Do as much as you can beforehand. Like if you're already recording and getting some in the bag, I feel like there's always, especially with what we do in family, there's always something coming up, and you're throwing audibles out there. So if you can have a couple of weeks or a month in the bag where something happens and you need to take a break and keep pumping out content, I think that for a long time, that's probably been the most difficult, because it gives you an opportunity to maintain a consistency there, in a worst case scenario. So that would be mine, just to pre-plan as much as you can.
Okay.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's been our biggest struggle is like, last night I almost canceled you, Mike. I was like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to record tomorrow
Because of the
because of
COVID,
COVID. And then like I put the team into like a spiral last night, and
I told my customer back and forth like 6 times. So it got so bad that I emailed her later because I didn't have the heart to tell her that I wasn't coming again. Because I had already told her I wasn't coming, then I was coming, then I wasn't. And finally I emailed her and was like, too late to text.
Yeah, and like I just felt bad for the entire situation. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna make it work. And I texted Ken. I'm like, hey, if I lock myself in the office, are you cool? He's like, sure. I'm like, great. And I show up and I'm
All right,
sweltering.
well, I appreciate you being a trooper for me, Nick.
Of course, but that's like Tyler's point is spot on. It's we've been doing this for 6 years and we've done it very much live week to week, and the few times that we've had a few in the bag have been this like weird like weight off our shoulders, but we immediately take advantage of it. It's like, we got one in the bag. Forget it. We'll record next week.
The
So
other
you guys
thing,
are the leader. You guys are the leader of the pack. You're the groundbreakers, right? We're all following you. So
well, there's a pack. I don't know if we're leading. The other thing that I would suggest, which I don't think that we did for a long time either, and it's a bandwidth type of thing, but do your homework and have some system involved with your conversation and what you want to talk about. And I know that Nick a lot of times wants to wing it, but I think of, there's people who interview people for a living, and there's journalists that do news stories, and they do it every single day, and that's they're professionals at that, and they still do their homework and they do their research, and they kind of craft a dialogue and a narrative. So I think that if you can do that to any sort of extent, I think it'll benefit you and your listeners a lot. And maybe you don't even follow that narrative, but I think that it'll be a more well curated conversation, with a little bit of homework on your end.
cool.
So that would be about it, and then have fun, because if it's not fun, it sucks. It's a lot of time. Yeah. But anything we can do to help, obviously reach out. And I know this will be coming out after your first podcast release, but let us know what we can do to spread the word.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. So if you guys want to check out their podcast, is the Level Heads on all platforms. Make sure you give it a listen, and make sure you drop them a review. Let them know how they're doing.
All I can think about is the Talking Heads.
I also didn't realize that all these groups have these nicknames.
I didn't know they had nicknames. I thought they were just numbered, but ours was one of the first Builder 20 groups. So I've been told, and they just came up with that nickname, and it's stuck.
I wonder if everyone's been the first, because our group is allegedly the first.
Well, ours was one of the first, right?
Yeah,
but you guys is rogue. You guys are rogue. You're not.
We're out of NHB
sanctioned
now. Yeah. So we were the original NHB group. We're the Hammers. And then next thing we know, it's like now we're not part of NHB.
The Hammers? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
The Hammers.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm supposed to say that.
Does everything look like a nail?
Yep. All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate you being on again. Good luck with the podcast. I'm sure we'll be speaking later on this evening through DM on Instagram. But
yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Keep up everything you're doing. I think you're doing a great job.
Appreciate it, man.
You're leading the industry, thought leaders, as you like to say yourself. But I'm a big fan, and I will continue to be a big fan.
Appreciate it, Mike.
Talk to you soon.
Take it easy.
Have a good one.
Before we sign off, guys, big thank you to our sponsors, Andersen Windows, Buildertrend, and of course, ROCKWOOL.
So what does Mike need to